The night shift on the Triton deepwater platform was usually quiet, too quiet sometimes. The only sounds were the low hum of machinery and the rhythmic slap of waves against the steel columns far below. Ethan Cross had worked out here for almost 5 years, and the stillness no longer bothered him. In fact, he'd learned to find a strange comfort in it. The endless ocean, the cold wind, the faint vibration of the platform beneath his boots. It had become a kind of routine heartbeat in his life. He moved methodically along the walkway, flashlight in hand, checking pressure gauges and jotting down notes on his clipboard. Everything looked normal. For once, the sea was calm, the air cool but steady, no hint of the storm predicted for later in the week. He was halfway through his rounds when something flickered at the edge of his vision, something out on the water. At first, Ethan thought it was just the reflection of the moonlight on the waves. A trick of light that happened all the time out here. But then it shifted. The reflection stretched, expanded, and began to move against the current. He frowned, stepping closer to the railing. The thing was huge, far larger than any whale he'd ever seen. It glided just beneath the surface, breaking it for only a second, and for that second he saw water cascading off a massive dark back before it disappeared again into the depths. What the hell? He muttered under his breath. He leaned farther over the railing, eyes straining against the darkness. Whatever it was moved with a strange, steady rhythm, circling slowly around the platform like it was studying it. This wasn't floating debris or a drifting shadow. It had purpose. Ethan watched until the black surface stilled again. The ocean returned to its natural role, quiet and unbroken. He waited 20 long minutes, gripping the railing, scanning the water for even the smallest sign of movement. But there was nothing. The sea was empty again. He forced himself to breathe. Maybe it had been a pod of whales moving together, or a school of fish twisting beneath the surface. Maybe fatigue was catching up with him. Night shifts had a way of playing with your perception. Still, the image wouldn't leave his mind. The scale, the slowness, the deliberate motion. He picked up his clipboard and forced himself to continue his inspection. But every metallic groan from the rig made his heart skip. Every shadow seemed deeper than it should have been. The glow from the platform lights flickered across the waves, revealing nothing but darkness and distance. When his shift finally ended just before dawn, he was exhausted but wired, his thoughts looping back to what he had seen. The horizon was turning silver, and the morning wind carried the faint smell of salt and oil. He removed his helmet, ran a hand through his damp hair, and stared out over the sea one last time. It looked calm again, almost innocent, as if nothing had happened. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had risen out there in the dark. Something that had looked back at him, and then slipped away, waiting for the right moment to return. By the time the sun rose over the endless blue horizon, Ethan Cross was running on fumes. His eyes burned from fatigue, and the memory of that dark shape beneath the waves refused to fade. He'd spent the rest of the night pacing the deck, glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see something rise again from the water. But nothing did. The sea remained deceptively calm, and the platform hummed along as if the night had never happened. When the morning bell rang for shift change, Ethan made his way to the mess hall. The smell of coffee and frying eggs hit him the moment he opened the door, and the sound of chatter and clinking utensils filled the air. The day crew was already gathered, voices loud, laughter easy, the kind of easy routine that came from too many days spent in the same metal box floating above miles of ocean. He spotted Captain Doyle, the platform's operations supervisor, sitting at a table with Ben Torres, Leo Tanaka, and Miguel Reyes, 3 of the most reliable hands on the rig. Ethan grabbed a tray, loaded it with coffee, toast, and whatever scrambled powder they were calling eggs today, then slid into the empty seat across from them. "Morning," he mumbled. Doyle looked up from his mug and raised an eyebrow. "Morning? You look like hell, Cross. You get any sleep last night?" Ethan hesitated, fingers tightening around the handle of his coffee cup. "Not really," he said finally. "I saw something out there last night." Ben glanced up, interested. "Something like what?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "It was big. Bigger than a whale. broke the surface for a few seconds and then disappeared. For a heartbeat, the table went quiet. Then Miguel snorted into his coffee. "Man, you've been out here too long." "Maybe you finally met your mermaid," even Doyle chuckled. "Sounds like someone needs a night off." "You've been on rotation too long, Cross. The sea's starting to mess with your head." Ethan forced a smile, but the words didn't land as jokes. "I'm serious," he said. It wasn't a shadow or a trick of light. It moved with purpose. It circled the rig. Leo Tanaka, the rig's systems analyst, set his spoon down and looked up from his breakfast. "There are giant squid species that can grow to over 40 feet in length," he said calmly. "It's possible you saw one." Ethan shook his head. "No, this was different. It didn't move like a squid. It wasn't darting or drifting. It was deliberate. Maybe the Loch Ness Monster took a vacation," Miguel teased, grinning. "Came out here to see how the oil boys live." Laughter rippled around the table. Ethan tried to join in, but the noise felt hollow in his chest. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that dark shape moving beneath the moonlit surface, silent and enormous. Maybe they were right. Maybe it was just fatigue. Maybe he was losing it. He looked down at his plate, appetite gone. The conversation drifted to other things: maintenance schedules, supply deliveries, a soccer game someone had managed to stream last week. But Ethan barely heard them. The rhythm of their laughter, the scrape of silverware, even the smell of coffee all blurred into a low hum behind his thoughts. After breakfast, the crew dispersed to their assignments. Doyle stayed behind, talking quietly with Leo about generator diagnostics, while Miguel went to check the winch systems on the lower deck. Ethan cleaned his tray and tried to shake off the fog in his head. He'd barely stepped into the corridor when Dr. Naomi Reyes, the rig's environmental systems specialist, appeared with a tablet in her hand. "Morning, Cross," she said briskly, brushing a few loose strands of dark hair from her face. "You look like you've been through hell." "Didn't sleep much," he admitted. "What's going on?" Naomi turned the tablet toward him, displaying a color-coded radar chart. "Weather alert from the mainland. Storm cell moving fast. Should hit us by evening," he frowned. "That soon?" "Yeah, Doyle already knows. He wants everything secured by 4. As if on cue, Robert Kane, one of the senior engineers, passed by and leaned in. "We've handled worse. Just another night in paradise." Naomi gave a wry smile. "Still better to be ready. I'll double-check the seals on the west storage bay. You take the lower deck with Robert. Make sure the generators are tied down." Ethan nodded, relieved to have something else to focus on. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. The crew moved like clockwork, tightening bolts, locking hatches, securing cables, checking every system that could fail under high wind. It was standard protocol, muscle memory after years offshore, but this time it felt heavier somehow. By late afternoon, the sky had shifted from blue to a bruised gray. The wind picked up, whistling through the support beams and whipping salt spray across the deck. Ethan stood with Robert near the fuel lines, double-checking clamps as the first drops of rain spattered against his face. "You ever get the feeling," Robert said suddenly, raising his voice over the wind, "that sometimes the ocean's watching us?" Ethan froze. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Last night I could have sworn something was." Robert glanced at him, brow furrowed, but before he could ask, the intercom crackled. Doyle's voice came through, steady but clipped. "All crew, secure final checks and report to control. Storm system ETA, 2 hours. Let's keep her tight, boys." They packed up and made their way inside. By evening, the platform's floodlights cut through sheets of rain. The waves below had turned violent, smashing against the supports with bone-deep rhythm. The entire structure creaked and trembled. Ethan watched from a window as lightning spidered across the horizon, illuminating the dark surface for just a moment. And in that brief flash of light, he thought, no, swore. He saw a dark curve move beneath the water again, slow, enormous, deliberate. He blinked, pressed his forehead against the cold glass. But when he looked again, there was nothing there but black water and reflected light. Still, the unease settled deep into his bones. Whatever he had seen the night before, it wasn't gone. It was waiting. By early evening, the wind had turned from a whisper to a roar. The ocean below the Triton deep-water platform was no longer calm or familiar. It had become a living, heaving thing, gray and angry beneath a bruised sky. Waves slammed against the support columns with the deep, shuddering sound of thunder underfoot. The steel frame vibrated as though the whole structure were breathing. Ethan Cross stood in the control room beside Leo Tanaka, watching the storm unfold through thick, reinforced windows streaked with rain. The control panels glowed dimly, rows of blinking lights reflecting off their faces in green and red. Outside, the world had disappeared into darkness and water. "That's stronger than the forecast," Leo muttered, adjusting his glasses and checking a data feed on one of the monitors. "Wind speeds 20 knots higher than projected, and the pressure's dropping faster than it should." Ethan nodded, gripping the edge of the console as another wave struck the lower decks hard enough to make the platform shudder. "Something feels off about this one," he said quietly. Leo looked up. "Off how?" He hesitated. "I don't know. It's not just the storm, it's the pattern. The waves aren't behaving right. It's like they're moving against the wind in places." Leo frowned and tapped through several readings. "You're right," he said after a moment. "Some of these wave directions don't match the wind flow. Could be an undercurrent." Or the radio crackled to life, interrupting him. James Vargas, head of security, came through, his voice strained through static. "Control, this is Vargas. Captain Doyle wants hourly updates on storm intensity. How's it looking up there?" "Worse than expected," Ethan replied, pressing the transmit button. "Winds climbing, waves getting erratic. We're monitoring now." "Copy that," James said. "I've got crews on the lower decks double-checking for water intrusion. Last thing we need is a flood in the generator rooms." "Understood," Ethan said. "Keep me posted." The transmission cut out. Another impact rattled the rig, harder this time, making the lights flicker before stabilizing. Ethan steadied himself, his stomach tightening. "That was close," he muttered. Leo scanned the gauges. "I'm getting some unusual readings from the wave sensors," he said. "Amplitude spikes, unrelated to wind gusts. Almost like something's displacing water near the supports." Ethan looked toward the rain-streaked window again. The sea was chaos. Rolling walls of black and white foam, twisted by the wind into spirals of fury. But beneath it, in the brief flashes of lightning, he thought he saw movement, something darker than the water, sliding through it. Before he could say anything, the door opened and Captain Doyle stepped in, his raincoat dripping and his expression grim. "Tanaka, Cross, give me the latest." Leo gestured at the monitors. "Storm's intensifying faster than models predicted. Pressure's dropping faster than standard. Wind shift every 10 minutes. Feels unstable." Doyle leaned over the console, jaw tight. "The hell does that mean for us?" "It means," Leo said, "this isn't just bad weather. It's irregular. Could be rogue currents or a pressure front forming under us." Doyle looked at Ethan. "You ever seen a storm behave like this?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "Not in 5 years out here." Another wave slammed the structure, this one strong enough to make the floor tremble beneath their boots. A few tools clattered off the workbench behind them. "That one hit different," Ethan said, steadying himself. Doyle grabbed the radio. "Vargas, status?" Static filled the air for a second, then James's voice returned. "We've got minor flooding on the east lower deck. Seal failure in one of the maintenance doors." "Miguel's team is on it." "Copy," Doyle said. "Keep it contained. If that water gets into the generator bay, we're in trouble." "Already on it," Vargas replied. Ethan turned back to the window. The ocean was a wall of motion now, waves rising higher than the deck itself. The lights flickered again. Thunder cracked so close it made the glass vibrate. He swallowed hard. "Feels like it's targeting us," he said softly. Leo gave him a sidelong look. "Targeting us?" "I don't know how else to explain it," Ethan said. "Every hit, it's like it knows exactly where to strike." Leo didn't respond, but he didn't dismiss it either. The storm howled louder, rattling the entire platform. Rain came in sheets, blurring the floodlights outside into ghostly halos. Somewhere below, metal groaned as the rig adjusted to the shifting pressure of the sea. By the time midnight neared, Ethan's nerves were raw. He checked systems, recalibrated monitors, reported numbers he could barely focus on. His eyes kept drifting back to the window, to that endless black ocean below, boiling with movement and shadow. The hours crawled by. The worst of the storm passed over, but the wind refused to die completely. When his shift finally ended, Ethan didn't feel relief. He just felt tense, wound up tight as a cable about to snap. He walked the corridor toward his bunk, trying to ignore the rhythmic groaning of the steel around him. The platform creaked in a way it never had before, like something enormous was brushing against it from below. He stopped. There it was again, a low, grinding sound echoing faintly from the lower decks. Not the usual hum of machinery, something deeper. He turned toward the stairwell, hand on the railing, listening. The sound faded, replaced by silence and the distant crash of waves. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe the storm had loosened a few joints. But even after he crawled into his bunk, exhaustion clawing at him, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the storm hadn't just passed. It had woken something that was still moving beneath them. Ethan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the storm again, the platform rocking under waves that seemed too deliberate, the lights flickering, the echo of steel groaning like the whole structure was being squeezed by invisible hands. The storm had technically passed, but the sea hadn't calmed. It moved in restless, uneven patterns, as if still disturbed by something deep below. Around 2 a.m, he gave up trying to rest. He threw on his coveralls, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped into the corridor. The hallways were empty, bathed in the faint red glow of emergency lighting. The hum of the generators echoed through the metal floor plates, steady but somehow uneasy, like a heartbeat that had lost its rhythm. He was about to turn toward the control room when he heard it again, that sound. A deep, slow grinding coming from below. Not machinery, not pipes. It sounded organic and metallic at the same time, like something massive was dragging across steel. Ethan froze. The noise reverberated through the floor, stopped, and then started again. He moved toward the stairwell, the flashlight beam cutting through the dim red haze. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sounding small against the vastness of the rig. "Anyone down there?" No reply. Just the distant hiss of the ocean wind outside. He descended the metal stairs cautiously. Each step echoed hollowly. The deeper he went, the louder the sound became, grinding, twisting, intermittent, like metal being bent slowly by an unseen force. The lower deck was darker, colder. Condensation beaded on the walls, dripping steadily to the floor. At the bottom, the noise stopped. Silence. Ethan's flashlight beam swept across the corridor. Pipes. Gauges, sealed doors, nothing out of place. The air smelled faintly of oil and rust. Everything looked normal, and yet every instinct told him it wasn't. He moved slowly along the walkway, checking each junction and hatch. "Robert, Miguel?" he called, hoping to hear a familiar voice. Nothing. Just the low hum of pumps and the faint creak of the structure shifting with the waves. Then the sound came again. Closer this time, echoing through the floor beneath him. It was deep, almost a vibration rather than a noise, like something alive moving under the platform's skin. Ethan's pulse quickened. He followed it toward the east section where the water pumps were housed. Everything was in perfect order. Gauges stable, valves sealed, no leaks. The maintenance log showed no scheduled work. There shouldn't have been anyone down here, and yet, for a few seconds the lights flickered, and the metal floor shuddered beneath his boots, as if something enormous had just brushed against the underside of the platform. Then silence again. He stood there for nearly half an hour, waiting, watching, flashlight beam trembling in his hand. But the sound didn't return. Eventually, he turned and climbed back toward the upper decks, uneasy but too tired to think straight. When he pushed open the control room door, the blue glow of the monitors greeted him, and so did Leo Tanaka, hunched over the radar station. His glasses caught the light, reflecting the green sweep of the display. "You're up early," Ethan said, trying to sound casual, though his voice still carried tension. Leo jumped slightly, startled. "Jesus Christ, don't sneak up like that. What are you doing up?" Ethan asked, moving closer. Leo hesitated, eyes flicking back to the monitor. "Couldn't sleep. I was checking the radar logs. There's something strange here." Ethan leaned in. The central screen showed the platform as a small, blinking icon, surrounded by empty blue space. But on the far edge of the display, a faint blip appeared, disappeared, and reappeared again, moving in a slow, circular pattern. "What's that?" Ethan asked quietly. "I've been tracking it for the last hour," Leo said. "At first I thought it was interference from the storm, but it's too consistent. Whatever it is, it's big, 30, maybe 40 feet long, and it's moving deliberately." Ethan felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine. "Deliberately?" Leo nodded. "It's circling us. Look." The radar sweep traced the blip again, around the platform, vanishing briefly before appearing on the opposite side. Over and over. A perfect orbit. Could it be a sub? Ethan asked, though even as he said it, he didn't believe it. "Not a chance," Leo replied. "The water's too shallow for military subs here, and it's moving too smoothly. No prop signature, no metallic resonance." Ethan's heart was pounding. "Leo, I saw something in the water last night. Before the storm hit," Leo turned to him, suddenly serious. "You actually saw it?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "It was massive. It broke the surface for a second. Dark like a whale, but bigger, heavier. It moved like it knew what it was doing." Leo frowned, adjusting the radar scale. "Then whatever it is, it hasn't left. It's still down there." Outside, the wind howled again, shaking the walls. The storm wasn't over after all, only pausing, as if giving them time to realize something else was happening. Ethan stared at the blip on the radar. Each time it completed a circle, his pulse ticked faster. It didn't drift away. It didn't wander. It just stayed, slow, deliberate, patient. Leo glanced at him. "You ever hear of sonar anomalies in deep-sea rigs?" Ethan shook his head. "There are old reports," Leo said, his voice low. "Unconfirmed stuff. Objects moving near rigs after seismic activity. Some say it's just currents, others say—" He trailed off. "Say what?" Leo hesitated, then forced a weak smile. "Never mind. Probably nothing. Still, I'm logging this. If it's not interference, we'll have data." Ethan watched the screen a moment longer. The green line swept again, once, twice, and the blip vanished completely. "Where'd it go?" he asked. Leo tapped a few keys. "It just dropped off radar. Depth reading says it moved below 50 feet. Maybe it dove deeper." Ethan exhaled slowly, uneasy. "Yeah, or maybe it's closer than the sensors can see." They both fell silent, staring at the radar as the sweep continued over the empty ocean. The faint hum of the platform filled the space between them. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The monitors glitched, static rippling across the display, before stabilizing again. Leo looked up, eyebrows drawn together. "That's odd. Power fluctuations shouldn't hit this system." Ethan stared out the rain-streaked window, heart still hammering. The sea outside looked like an endless wall of darkness. Somewhere out there, something had moved. Something alive, patient and aware. Whatever it was, it hadn't come with the storm. It had come before it. And it was still there. The storm returned with a vengeance the next day, as if the ocean had been waiting for dawn to rise before it struck again. By noon, the sky was a dark, churning bruise, and waves the size of buildings pounded the platform, sending sprays of seawater up past the floodlights. The wind howled so loud it drowned out thought, turning every shout into a whisper. The entire rig trembled under the assault, a groaning beast of metal and bolts fighting to stay alive. Ethan Cross had barely slept. He and Leo Tanaka had monitored the radar all morning, trying to relocate the strange blip, but it hadn't returned. Still, neither of them believed it was gone. Some instinct told Ethan it was still nearby, circling below, waiting. By mid-afternoon, Dr. Naomi Reyes was in the communications room, her brow furrowed as she struggled with a headset. "The lines were dead. Nothing but static," she said, her voice tight. "I've tried every frequency. We can't raise the mainland. Could it be storm interference?" Ethan asked, though he could tell from her expression she already knew it wasn't. "Maybe," she said, shaking her head. "But even the satellite backup is down, and that's not supposed to happen. It's like something's disrupting the signal directly." She switched to the emergency satellite phone next, punching in a series of codes. The screen flickered, then went dark. "No signal," she whispered, then stood abruptly and opened a maintenance panel on the wall. "Hand me that light." Ethan shined the flashlight into the open circuitry as Naomi leaned in. "Look at this," she said after a moment. The wires were frayed, not from age or water, but melted, fused in strange, uneven patterns. It's like something corroded them, or burned through them chemically. Could it be an overload? Ethan asked. Not like this, she replied, her voice almost a whisper. These systems are surge protected. This isn't electrical damage, it's organic. Ethan stared at her. Organic? Naomi straightened up, snapping the panel shut. Whatever caused this, it wasn't the storm. By evening, she'd replaced the damaged wires, but communications remained dead. The storm battered the platform, and every few minutes a new shudder ran through the steel. The crew gathered in the mess hall as Captain Doyle called an emergency meeting. The air inside was thick with unease. 21 men and women, all hardened by years offshore, now sat silent, their faces drawn and pale under the harsh fluorescent light. The wind outside roared like a living thing pressing its face against the walls. We're cut off until the storm passes, Doyle said, standing at the front of the room, voice raised above the constant rumble. Dr. Reyes did what she could with the comms, but it's no good. Our backups are out. The good news is, the rig's holding steady, and we have enough supplies to wait this out. Ethan scanned the room. No one looked convinced. Even James Vargas, the head of security, was standing in the back with his arms crossed, his usual calm replaced by quiet tension. He caught Ethan's eye and gave a faint shake of the head. After the meeting broke, Ethan approached him. You don't buy it either. James's expression was unreadable. I don't like being blind out here, he said quietly. Cut off from the mainland, no comms, no radar confirmation. Makes us vulnerable. To what? Ethan asked, though deep down, he didn't want the answer. James shrugged slightly. Could be nothing. Could be something. I'm doubling the security rotation tonight, just in case. The night dragged on in a haze of exhaustion and noise. The storm had grown so intense it felt like the sky was tearing itself apart. Lightning flashed in violent bursts, illuminating the decks in ghostly white. The wind screamed through the gaps in the steel. Ethan found himself walking the corridors restlessly, unable to shake the growing sense that something was wrong, more wrong than a normal storm could make it. At around 11, Robert Kane, one of the senior engineers, went to check the pressure valves on the east side. Routine work. He'd done it hundreds of times. Back in 20, he said before heading out, pulling his hood up against the rain. But he didn't come back. An hour passed, then another. No response on the radio. Ethan was sitting with Ben Torres and Miguel Reyes in the break room when Captain Doyle burst in, his expression tight. Has anyone seen Robert? They all shook their heads. He went to check the east valves, Miguel said. He should have been back ages ago. Doyle's jaw tightened. Get your gear. We're going to find him. Within minutes, the search teams were organized. Doyle paired Ethan with Miguel for the east section. Naomi and Leo were sent to the lower decks, and James led another group north. Ethan and Miguel pushed through the wind as they stepped onto the open walkway, rain lashing against their faces. The storm was deafening, the decks slick beneath their boots. Robert. Miguel shouted into the wind. You out here? No response. They reached the valve station first. The logbook was there, the readings all normal, freshly updated in Robert's handwriting. He had finished the job, but his tools were gone, and there was no sign of him. Ethan swept his flashlight along the railings and across the deck, the beam bouncing off sheets of water and metal. Robert! He yelled again. Nothing. Maybe he went to check another line, Miguel said, his voice uncertain. They spent the next hour searching every corridor, every storage bay, every hatchway. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. When they regrouped in the control room, Doyle was pacing in tight circles. Naomi and Leo had found nothing below. James's team had turned up empty-handed on the north end. This doesn't make sense, Doyle said finally, slamming his palm against the console. He couldn't have gone overboard. Safety barriers are intact, and he knows better than to take risks in weather like this. Naomi's face was pale. Then where is he? For the first time since Ethan had known him, Doyle didn't have an answer. We'll keep searching, he said finally. Nobody goes anywhere alone. From now on, two-man teams minimum. No one argued. No one even looked at each other. The silence in the control room was heavier than the storm outside. Later, Ethan tried to rest again, but the moment he closed his eyes, all he could see was the black water swallowing the edges of the platform. Somewhere down there, something moved. Something that had taken Robert. Around 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, he went to the observation deck. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, and flashes of lightning still rolled across the sky. From up there, the sea stretched in every direction, endless and unknowable. He stood at the railing, staring into the black waves. Then lightning split the sky again, and he saw it, a dark shape, massive and deliberate, circling the platform. Just like the radar had shown, it moved like a living shadow under the surface, at least 40 feet long, maybe more. For a few seconds, Ethan could see what looked like ridges or spines breaking the water before they vanished again into the depths. His breath caught in his throat. This wasn't fatigue, wasn't imagination. It was real. Something alive was circling them. He stayed there until the last flash faded, until the waves turned black again. His heart was pounding so loud he could hear it in his ears. He remembered the cameras, external security feeds that covered the ocean perimeter. If he could get proof of what he saw, no one could dismiss it this time. Ethan sprinted to the security room, boots echoing down the corridor. Inside, the room was empty. He sat down at the console, fingers trembling as he brought up the live feeds. Camera after camera flickered to life, grainy, distorted, half blinded by rain. For 20 minutes, he stared at the monitors, switching between angles, adjusting contrast, waiting for a glimpse. Then camera 3 flickered, and there it was. A disturbance. A massive shadow slicing through the water. "Got you," he whispered, hitting record. The shape moved gracefully, too fast for a drifting object, too heavy to be a fish. It circled once, twice, then slipped deeper until it disappeared from view. Ethan saved the footage, copied it to a flash drive, and slipped it into his pocket. Tomorrow, he would show everyone. Doyle, Naomi, James. They needed to see what he'd seen. Outside the window, dawn was starting to rise, faint orange light breaking across the clouds. The ocean looked calm again, deceptively so. But Ethan knew better. Whatever had taken Robert wasn't done. It was still down there, watching, waiting for the next one. Ethan barely slept that morning. His eyes burned, his hands trembled, and every sound from the storm-weary platform felt amplified. The creak of metal, the thrum of the generators, the whisper of wind through the vents. The flash drive in his pocket felt like it weighed 100 pounds. He had proof now, finally. As soon as he heard voices in the corridor, he headed for the control room. Captain Doyle was hunched over a stack of reports, jaw tight and eyes shadowed from lack of rest. Dr. Naomi Reyes was at the monitors, cross-checking readings from the previous night. They both looked up as Ethan entered, soaked in tension and determination. "You look worse than last night," Doyle said flatly. Ethan didn't bother with small talk. He held up the flash drive. "I need to show you something." "It's important." Doyle exhaled through his nose but gestured toward one of the workstations. "Fine. Make it quick. We've got enough fires to put out already." Ethan plugged the drive in, the monitor flickering to life as the video loaded. "This is from the east side external camera, last night around 3 a.m. Watch closely." The footage rolled. Grainy black water under floodlight glow, rain hammering the lens. Then, after a few seconds, a massive dark shape slid through the frame, just beneath the surface. It was hard to define. No clear edges, just motion, density, and scale. "There," Ethan said, leaning forward. "You see it? It's huge, 40 feet at least. That's not debris." Naomi leaned closer, her brow furrowing. "I see something, but it's faint. Hard to make out." Doyle crossed his arms, unimpressed. "Could be anything. Reflection, camera glitch, drifting cargo. That storm tossed half the ocean around us." "No," Ethan insisted. "It was moving, purposefully. I watched it circle the rig with my own eyes." He rewound and played it again, pointing. "There, you see that curvature? That's a back or a fin, not metal." The captain shook his head. "All I see is shadows." "You've been awake too long, Cross. You're starting to see patterns in static." Frustration flared in Ethan's chest. "I know what I saw." "You think I'm making this up?" Before Doyle could respond, Naomi spoke quietly. Actually, there's something else you both need to see. She switched the main screen to another display, a live graph of seismic activity below the platform. The lines spiked unevenly across the screen, jagged peaks, rising higher and higher. These are readings from the seabed sensors, she said. They've been registering tremors for the past week, but the pattern isn't natural. It's too regular, not tectonic, not equipment vibration. And it's stronger now than it's ever been, Doyle frowned. Why am I just hearing about this? At first I thought it was calibration drift, Naomi replied. Minor fluctuations happen all the time, but last night the amplitude tripled. It's coming from directly beneath us. Ethan stared at the graph, the jagged red lines pulsing like a heartbeat. You think whatever I saw is causing this? Naomi hesitated. I don't know. But it's not geological. It's movement. Something massive is shifting under the ocean floor. The captain rubbed his temples. So, we've got blurry footage and shaky readings. None of this proves anything. For all we know, the storm's still disturbing the sensors. Ethan turned to him. Then how do you explain Robert? He didn't just vanish. Before Doyle could answer, the control room door burst open. James Vargas stood in the doorway, drenched in rain, face pale. We've got another problem, he said, breathless. Doyle straightened instantly. What now? Lisa Kwan and Michael Hughes. They're missing. The room went dead silent. Missing how? Naomi asked, standing. They were checking the lower deck pumps an hour ago, James said. They missed their check-in. I sent a team. All they found were their tools. Just lying there. No sign of either of them. Doyle swore under his breath, pacing. That's 3 people now. 3. Ethan felt a chill crawl through him. This thing's taking them. Enough, Doyle snapped. We don't know that. Naomi folded her arms, meeting his gaze. Then explain it. Robert, Lisa, Michael, all gone without a trace. The communication system's corroded, and the seabed is moving. You still think this is coincidence? Doyle's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. James stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. Whatever's happening, our first priority is keeping the rest of the crew safe. I'm setting up a secure zone in the central block. Limited access points, reinforced bulkheads. We'll post watch rotations until we understand what's going on. Do it, Doyle said after a pause. And keep everyone together. No one works alone. Word spread fast. Within 20 minutes, the entire crew was assembled in the mess hall. The air buzzed with anxious whispers. The storm outside hadn't let up. Rain pounded the steel roof like fists, and thunder rolled continuously over the sea. Doyle stood at the front, trying to project calm. As you've all heard, we have 3 crew members unaccounted for. We're conducting a full search, but until further notice, no one goes anywhere alone. You move in pairs, you stay in sight of each other at all times. That's an order. A voice rose from the crowd. Is it the storm? Could they have gone overboard? The barriers are intact, Doyle said. We'll find them. Just stay alert. Another voice cut through, shaky, nervous. You don't lose 3 people to a storm inside the platform. Ethan stepped forward before Doyle could shut it down. There's something else, he said, raising his voice so everyone could hear. Last night I recorded footage from the external cameras. Something's in the water moving around us. And Dr. Reyes found seismic readings from directly beneath the rig. Whatever's happening, it's not the storm. The murmuring stopped. All eyes turned toward him. Naomi brought up the data on a nearby monitor, the seismic graph flashing across the screen. These readings are real, she said. Something large is shifting down there. Are you saying there's something alive under us? Ben Torres asked, disbelief edging into panic. Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes, I think so. I saw it twice. Someone laughed nervously. What are you talking about, a sea monster? Ethan met his eyes. Call it whatever you want, but it's real. Doyle slammed his palm against the table. Enough! We're not starting a panic over ghost stories and camera glitches. Naomi turned on him. Then what's your explanation? 3 disappearances, electrical corrosion, seismic spikes, all in the same 24 hours? You want to tell me that's normal? For a long moment, no one spoke. The storm boomed overhead. Finally, James said quietly, Argue later. Right now we secure the crew. Doyle nodded reluctantly. Fine, everyone listen up. The central corridor will serve as our safe zone. Vargas and I will oversee shifts. You'll have food, power, and limited comm access from there. Until further notice, that's where you stay. As the meeting broke apart into murmurs and movement, Ethan caught Naomi's eye. The fear in her expression matched his own. Neither of them needed to say it aloud. This wasn't over. Whatever was down there had already taken 3 of them, and it wasn't finished yet. The wind screamed like a living thing that night. The storm had rebuilt itself from the horizon and came crashing back with a fury none of them had ever felt before. Sheets of rain slammed the steel decks, and each wave struck the Triton deepwater platform with enough force to make the floor vibrate beneath their boots. The entire structure moaned as if it were alive and afraid. Inside the central section, every surviving crew member had gathered. The safe zone, reinforced walls, few windows, the thickest part of the rig, felt more like a bunker than a refuge. The red emergency lights gave everything a faint, hellish glow. Ethan Cross stood by the window of the control room beside Dr. Naomi Reyes, watching the storm unfold. Lightning ripped through the clouds, turning the ocean silver for a heartbeat before plunging it back into blackness. Each flash revealed waves rising higher, moving wrong, curling in directions the wind couldn't justify. Naomi's voice was low but steady. "The seismic activity's spiking again," she said, eyes locked on the monitor. "Look at this pattern." Ethan leaned over her shoulder. The readings were wild, sharp, rhythmic surges instead of random tremors. They pulsed, almost like a heartbeat. "Those aren't quakes," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered. "It's movement. Something shifting beneath us." A shudder ran through the floor, followed by a deep, metallic groan that vibrated in their bones. The lights flickered once, then steadied. "Pressure spike on the lower supports," Naomi said, scanning another screen. "Something just hit us. Another wave?" Ethan asked. She shook her head. "That impact came from below." Before he could respond, Captain Doyle stormed into the room, soaked to the skin and furious. "We've got water breaching sections 4 and 5. Vargas's team is trying to seal it, but the pumps can't keep up." Ethan's pulse jumped. "Below the living quarters?" "East side," Doyle said. "If that bulkhead gives, we lose power to the generators." The entire platform shuddered again, this time so hard that tools rattled off the counters. Naomi grabbed the console for balance. "That's not weather," she said. "That's something hitting us." The radio crackled suddenly, a burst of static. Then James Vargas's voice cut through, loud and strained. "Control, we've got water coming in fast. Door seals are failing. It's like the whole lower hull's been torn open." Naomi's face went pale. "Torn open? By what?" "Don't know," Vargas shouted. "We're trying to reinforce, but wait." There was a sharp screech, metal against metal, followed by shouting, then the line went dead. "Vargas?" Doyle barked into the radio. "James, come in!" Nothing. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain hammering the windows and the low, grinding rumble coming from beneath the floor. Ethan's breath caught in his chest. "It's under us." Naomi turned slowly toward him. "What?" "The thing I saw. It's under the platform." The floor tilted slightly, then steadied. The lights flickered again, and for one terrible instant, the backup power failed completely, plunging them into darkness. The noise of the storm outside swallowed them whole. When the lights snapped back, the seismic monitor was off the charts, red lines slashing across the screen like an electric pulse. Naomi's voice was barely a whisper. "It's awake." Doyle slammed his hand on the console. "Get everyone to the safe zone now." They ran through the corridor, alarms blaring around them, the sirens mixing with the roar of the storm. Doors slammed as crew members rushed inside. The central block became a tangle of bodies, dripping with seawater, faces wide with fear. James burst in moments later, coughing and soaked, blood streaking his temple. "The east corridor's gone," he gasped. "Flooded completely. We barely made it back." Doyle pulled him upright. "Is the lower deck secure?" James shook his head. "No chance. Something punched through the hull. We've got structural fractures spreading upward." A deep tremor rolled through the platform again, stronger than before. Everyone stumbled as the floor shifted beneath them. Naomi grabbed Ethan's arm, eyes wide. "That's not the storm. Feel the pattern. It's coming from below us, not around us. Another jolt, sharper this time." A pipe overhead split open, spraying cold seawater into the room. Panic broke out instantly. "Everyone stay calm," Doyle shouted, but no one was listening. The emergency lights flickered to red. The power systems whined, struggling to hold. Naomi was staring at her tablet, her face ashen. The sensors just went offline, all of them at once. "They can't all fail simultaneously," Ethan said. "They didn't fail," she said quietly. Something destroyed them. Then it came, the sound none of them would ever forget. A deep, resonant moan that rose from the depths and vibrated through the entire rig. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't natural. It was alive. The noise made the air itself feel heavy, pressing on their chests until they could barely breathe. The steel walls groaned in response, bending almost imperceptibly as if the structure were crying out in pain. "What the hell was that?" Ben whispered. Nobody answered. Doyle's voice was hoarse when he spoke. "Get the lifeboats ready. In this weather?" James barked. "Waves are 30 feet high. We'd never make it." "We don't have a choice," Doyle said. "If this structure gives way, it'll take us with it." Another violent tremor shook the floor. Alarms blared as the computerized voice of the platform's emergency system filled the room. "Warning. Structural integrity compromised. Sections 5 through 8 unstable. Immediate evacuation recommended." The tilt became more pronounced now. The deck slanted just enough for tools and debris to slide across the floor. Crew members stumbled, grabbing railings to keep their footing. Naomi was staring at her screen again. "Look, external feed just came online." She tapped a key, and one of the last working cameras flickered to life on the monitor. The image was blurry, distorted by rain and static. But through it, they saw the ocean, black and raging, and something rising from it. The shape was colossal, segmented, the water cascading off its surface as it broke through the waves. For a second, its ridged back caught the light before it sank again, leaving only turbulence behind. "Oh my God," someone whispered. The deck lurched violently, knocking several people to the floor. The sound of twisting metal filled the air, screams of bolts tearing loose, beams groaning under pressure. "The supports are failing," Naomi shouted. Doyle's eyes darted across the room. "Everyone move, now! Lifeboats, upper deck!" Ethan grabbed Naomi's arm and pulled her toward the corridor. Behind them, the room was already tilting, loose gear skidding toward the far wall. Alarms blared in a chaotic chorus. They pushed through the narrow passage, half the crew ahead of them, half behind. The floor pitched again, sending them staggering into the walls. Through a crack in the bulkhead, Ethan saw the black water just a few meters below, rising fast. The sound came again, louder this time, impossibly close. It wasn't just noise. It was a call, a vibration that shook their bones and made their hearts skip in time with it. Naomi clutched her chest. "It's right under us." "Then we move faster," Ethan said, grabbing her wrist. They broke through the final door to the upper deck. Rain hit them like needles. The platform was tilting hard now, the horizon skewed. Lightning split the sky again, revealing the scale of the chaos. The rig twisted, parts of it already half submerged. 2 of the 4 lifeboats were crushed, mangled like aluminum cans. The remaining 2 hung crookedly from their mounts. Doyle shouted over the storm, "We still have room! Get people loaded!" James was herding survivors toward the first lifeboat, yelling orders drowned by the wind. Ethan and Naomi pushed forward, helping whoever they could. The deck trembled under their feet as another section gave way. Somewhere below, something groaned, long, low and hungry. Ethan didn't look down. He didn't have to. He knew it was... They're watching, waiting. The storm wasn't the enemy anymore. The ocean itself was. The storm raged with a madness that felt almost sentient. Every gust of wind screamed through the steel frame like a voice. Every wave that struck the rig sounded less like water and more like the roar of something alive beneath the sea. The Triton platform was dying, slowly, painfully, and everyone on it could feel it. Ethan Cross pulled Dr. Naomi Reyes up the slanted deck, his muscles burning as the platform groaned and tilted farther under its own collapsing weight. Captain Doyle shouted orders somewhere behind them, his voice nearly swallowed by the wind. "Move! Get to the lifeboats! Now!" The stormlight turned everything a violent shade of gray. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the chaos in brief, blinding flashes. The deck was slick with seawater, tools, and fragments of twisted metal. Crew members stumbled and slid, clutching railings, hauling one another forward. James Vargas was already at the lifeboat station, yelling over the radio that barely worked. 2 boats operational. The others are destroyed. Ethan looked up and saw it. 2 of the 4 lifeboats hanging intact, though swinging violently from their mounts. The other 2 were mangled beyond recognition, their frames crushed as if something enormous had wrapped around them and squeezed. What could even do that? Leo Tanaka shouted from behind, his face streaked with rain. Ethan didn't answer. The truth clawed at the edge of his mind, but putting it into words felt dangerous, like naming it would summon it closer. The platform lurched again. The sound of tearing metal echoed like a scream through the storm. Doyle steadied himself against the railing, shouting, "Everyone in pairs! Get those lifeboats loaded!" Naomi grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him toward the first group. "We can fit 12 per boat." "We need to move fast." They stumbled toward the launch platform, the deck vibrating beneath their feet. Lightning exploded across the clouds, revealing a horizon that didn't look right. The waves were too high, too organized, rolling inward, converging toward the platform from all sides. It was like the ocean itself was closing in. Then they heard it again. That low, resonant sound that wasn't thunder, wasn't wind. A deep, ancient moan from beneath the surface. It was so powerful it made the deck quiver and their chests ache. Everyone froze for just a second, instinctively looking toward the water. A few meters below the platform's edge, something shifted. The waves bulged outward, then sank back, leaving only ripples. "What the hell was that?" Ben Torres whispered, voice trembling. Ethan didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the dark water, scanning for movement. For a moment, everything went still, unnaturally still, as if the storm itself was holding its breath. Then the platform jolted so violently that half the crew fell to the deck. Alarms blared, drowning out the wind. The computerized voice returned, eerily calm amid the chaos. "Warning. Structural integrity critical. Evacuate immediately." Sections of the rig broke away and plunged into the sea below. Flames shot from a ruptured fuel line, painting the storm in orange and black. "Go!" Doyle roared. "Everyone to the west side lifeboat, move!" Ethan pushed Naomi forward, guiding her through the screaming wind and rain. The metal underfoot was tilted almost 30 degrees now. He grabbed a fallen railing and used it as leverage to climb. They reached the first lifeboat, where James was shoving people inside. "We're over capacity," he yelled. "We'll sink if just get them in," Doyle shouted back. "We're out of time." Ethan turned to look for Eric Hale, one of the newer technicians. He spotted him a few meters away, walking slowly toward the edge of the deck. Something about his movement was wrong, too calm, too steady in the middle of chaos. "Eric," Ethan shouted. "Get back here!" The man didn't respond. Rain streamed down his face, his eyes wide but unfocused, fixed on the boiling sea below. His lips moved, whispering something Ethan couldn't hear. Naomi followed Ethan's gaze. "What's he doing?" Eric took another slow step toward the edge, his expression eerily peaceful. "They're calling to me," he said softly, voice eerily calm amid the storm. "They said it's safe down there. Eric, stop!" Ethan sprinted forward, slipping on the slick deck. He reached him just as Eric swung one leg over the railing. He grabbed the back of Eric's coveralls and yanked him backward with everything he had. Both men went down hard, sliding across the tilted floor until they slammed into the base of a bulkhead. "What's wrong with you?" Ethan shouted, struggling to keep hold as Eric thrashed weakly. Eric's eyes were unfocused, his voice flat. "They've been sleeping," he said, "for so long. But now they're awake. They need us." "Who?" Naomi demanded, her voice trembling. He looked up at her and smiled faintly. "The ones beneath. The ones who remember when the world was young." A deafening crack cut through the air as another section of the platform tore free and vanished into the sea. The floor dropped under their feet. "Alarms wailed. Get him inside!" Doyle shouted. Ethan and Naomi half-dragged, half-carried Eric toward the central compartment. James met them halfway, helping restrain him. They forced him into a chair, securing his wrists with plastic ties from the emergency kit. Eric stopped struggling but kept murmuring, eyes distant, as if listening to something deep below. Outside, the storm raged on. "We can't stay here," Naomi shouted. The structure won't hold much longer. James nodded grimly. The east corridor's flooding fast. We've got about 15 minutes before the upper decks start to go. The lights flickered again, then died completely. Darkness swallowed the room. The only illumination came from Naomi's tablet, glowing faintly as she checked the sensors. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. We just lost 3 supports under the main structure. The rest are under pressure, too much pressure. From the waves? Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. Naomi met his eyes. No, from below. Then it hit again. A violent jolt that sent everyone sprawling. The sound was indescribable, a mix of grinding metal and something deeper, more primal, as if the ocean floor itself was shifting. A fire alarm began to blare somewhere above them. Someone screamed that there was a gas leak. The air smelled of smoke and salt. Doyle's voice cut through the noise. Everyone out! Move to the upper deck. Ethan turned to Naomi. Go! What about Eric? She shouted. I'll get him. Just go. She hesitated, then ran. Ethan cut the restraints from Eric's wrists and hauled him to his feet. Come on, you're not dying down here. But Eric's eyes were vacant, his body limp. You don't understand, he whispered. They're already here. Before Ethan could respond, a sound rose from below, a roar so deep and resonant it made the deck vibrate like a drum. The walls flexed, the metal straining as if something vast was moving beneath the hull. Ethan dragged Eric through the corridor toward the deck, the incline growing worse with every step. The rig was listing, sinking on one side. Firelight flashed through the windows, reflecting in the rising black water below. When they reached the open air, the storm had reached its peak. The sea was a writhing mass of foam and darkness. The second lifeboat was already half submerged, crew members scrambling to keep it upright. Doyle was shouting orders, Naomi helping people climb into the first boat. We can fit 10 more, she yelled. Ethan shoved Eric forward, helping him climb the side rail. Get in! But Eric didn't move. He turned back toward the water, rain dripping down his face like tears. They're waiting, he said. They want me to join them. Eric, no! Ethan lunged, but it was too late. The man stepped back once, twice, and then dove cleanly over the railing. Eric! Ethan shouted, racing to the edge. The sea below erupted. Something massive and dark rose from the depths, a shape so large it broke the surface in multiple places at once. For a second, Ethan saw the outline of ridged armor, spines, and movement. Then the water closed over Eric's head, and both were gone. Naomi's scream was lost in the wind. We have to go! The platform groaned violently. Fire spread across the deck, licking up the railings. Doyle pointed to the lifeboats. Launch now. They piled in. James released the mechanism, and the boat dropped into the raging sea with a bone-jarring crash. Water poured over the sides as they fought to steady themselves. Above them, the Triton platform was coming apart. Beams collapsing. Explosions bursting through the rain. Ethan turned in time to see the second lifeboat trying to lower, only to be struck by a wave that flipped it over. He saw Captain Doyle and several others thrown into the water, their lights vanishing one by one. The noise beneath them grew louder, a deep, rolling vibration that wasn't thunder, wasn't machinery. It was alive. The waves moved with it, pulsing outward as if something enormous was surfacing again. Naomi clung to the railing beside him, her face ghost pale. It's not following the storm, she said, voice breaking. The storm is following it, behind them. The Triton platform finally gave out a long, metallic scream, and then collapsed in on itself, vanishing into the sea. And for a few terrible seconds, as the debris sank, Ethan saw something move beneath the wreckage, massive, ancient, and watching them as it descended into the dark. The Triton deepwater platform was gone. What had once been a floating city of metal and noise was now nothing more than fire and twisted wreckage scattered across a storm-torn sea. The lifeboat pitched violently as the waves heaved beneath it, the remains of the rig still glowing in the distance like a floating funeral pyre. Ethan Cross gripped the railing so hard his knuckles burned. Every muscle in his arms screamed from the effort of keeping the lifeboat upright. The rain had turned into a freezing wall of water, slashing sideways with every gust of wind. Beside him, Dr. Naomi Reyes clung to the opposite railing, her hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with disbelief. "Is anyone else out there?" she shouted over the roar of the wind. Ethan turned, scanning the black horizon. Lightning split the sky, revealing only destruction, lifeboat fragments, burning debris, and scattered lights sinking one by one beneath the surface. He counted 6 survivors in their boat. Naomi, Leo Tanaka, James Vargas, Ben Torres, and 2 younger crew members, whose names Ethan barely remembered through the chaos. "Doyle?" Naomi asked, though her voice was hollow, like she already knew the answer. Ethan shook his head. He didn't make it. The second boat went under. Another wave slammed the lifeboat sideways, sending everyone crashing into one another. Someone screamed as they nearly went overboard. James lunged forward, grabbing the man by his jacket and hauling him back just in time. "Hold tight," James barked. "We lose anyone else, we're done." The wind shrieked again. A shadow of something immense passed under the water, close enough that the lifeboat rose and dipped as if riding the back of an unseen beast. Ethan froze. He could feel it, a pressure beneath them, the sea drawing downward as though something vast was moving directly below. "It's under us," he whispered. Naomi looked at him sharply. "What?" the creature. "It's still here." The lifeboat rocked again, this time harder, almost tipping. Everyone screamed as the bow lifted and then slammed down, the impact sending cold water over the edges. The ocean around them boiled, the waves twisting unnaturally in a wide circle. "Row! Row, goddammit!" James shouted. They grabbed the oars and paddled with desperate strength, but the currents weren't random anymore. They were being pulled inward, toward the heart of the wreckage. The lifeboat spun as though caught in the slow pull of a massive whirlpool. Lightning flared again, and in that instant, they all saw it, a shape beneath the surface. Bigger than the rig itself, vast, ridged, moving with impossible grace through the depths. Its outline glimmered faintly, bioluminescent veins pulsing along its body like rivers of fire beneath the skin. And for a moment it rose just enough that they saw what looked like an eye, massive, golden, and utterly alien, turning slowly toward them. Naomi's breath hitched. "Oh my God." Leo dropped his oar, his voice shaking. "That's not possible." The thing shifted and the sea erupted. A column of water shot upward, as one of the wrecked support beams was hurled skyward like a toy. The blast sent the lifeboat spinning, knocking 2 crew members overboard. "Get them," Naomi screamed. Ethan reached out instinctively, fingers brushing one man's sleeve, and then he was gone, sucked into the churning blackness below. The other vanished seconds later, dragged under by an unseen force. James cursed under his breath, slamming a fist into the side of the boat. "We can't fight this!" "Don't stop rowing!" Ethan yelled, even though he knew it was pointless. The sea lifted again, higher this time, as the shape beneath them moved. The pressure in the air changed, heavy enough to make Ethan's ears pop. It felt like the ocean was breathing, inhaling. Then, for a moment that stretched forever, everything stopped. The rain eased, the waves stilled, even the wind went silent. Naomi turned toward Ethan, her voice trembling. "It's gone," he shook his head slowly. "No, it's right beneath us." The words had barely left his mouth when the ocean exploded. A surge of water rose upward in a perfect circle, sending the lifeboat flying into the air. Ethan felt himself weightless for a split second before everything turned upside down. The world became sound and water and pain. He hit the sea hard. Salt burned his throat as he struggled to surface. The cold stole his breath instantly. The overturned lifeboat loomed beside him, illuminated by the faint flicker of lightning above. "Naomi!" he shouted, spitting seawater. "Naomi, where are you?" No response. Just the storm and the endless crash of waves. He kicked toward the boat, flipping it back with a burst of strength. One hand reached up from the other side, Naomi's. He grabbed her wrist and hauled her in, both of them collapsing inside. Gasping and shaking, they were alone. The sea was a graveyard of floating debris, fragments of metal, a single life jacket. An oil drum bobbing aimlessly in the current. Naomi turned to him, voice hoarse. "The others!" Ethan couldn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between them said everything. Then came the sound. A deep, slow rumble that wasn't thunder. It came from below, vibrating through the hull of the lifeboat. Ethan looked down instinctively and froze. Through the swirling depths, Faint lights flickered, patterns, lines, something moving, not fast, not violent, but vast, ancient, deliberate, Naomi whispered. It's watching us. The lights pulsed once, bright enough to glow through the water, then vanished, sinking into the dark. Moments later, the storm began to ease. The rain thinned to a drizzle. The wind dropped to a tired sigh. The sea settled as if nothing had happened. The horizon stretched empty, calm, infinite. They drifted in silence for hours, clinging to the wrecked lifeboat as dawn finally bled across the clouds. The sky turned pale gray, the ocean flat and unbroken. No rescue ships, no radio signals. Just two survivors floating in an endless mirror. Ethan's hands were raw from gripping the oars. His voice was barely a whisper when he said, "It's gone." Naomi shook her head. "No, it's just gone deeper." Neither of them spoke again. The morning light glinted off the still surface of the sea, and for a moment it almost looked peaceful. But when Ethan stared into the depths, he could still feel it, something vast, patient, and intelligent far below. It hadn't destroyed the rig out of anger. It had done it to remind them that the ocean was never theirs to tame. And somewhere, miles beneath their drifting boat, in a silence older than the world, it opened its eyes again. When rescue finally came, it felt almost unreal. The horizon blurred into a pale haze, the storm long gone, the sea eerily calm. Ethan Cross barely noticed the helicopter until the low, rhythmic thump of its rotors reached him across the endless gray. He lifted a trembling hand, too weak to wave, and the pilot banked toward them. A search and rescue vessel followed close behind, cutting through the water like a silver knife. By the time they were pulled aboard, Ethan could hardly stand. Naomi Reyes collapsed beside him on the deck, coughing up seawater. Paramedics wrapped them both in thermal blankets, voices loud and urgent but distant, like echoes in fog. Someone pressed an oxygen mask to Ethan's face. Another voice asked him his name. What happened? How many survivors there were? He tried to answer, but the words stuck in his throat. All he could see when he closed his eyes was the ocean, still and black, hiding everything it had taken. Hours blurred into days. They were transferred to a coastal hospital on the mainland. Rooms bright and sterile after the weeks of darkness. Reporters tried to reach them, but security kept the press away. Company officials arrived within hours of their rescue, men in pressed suits with expressions carved from stone. The first to visit was Aaron Lowe, chief investigator for the Triton Energy Corporation. He entered Ethan's room, flanked by two silent aides, his smile polite but cold. "Mr. Cross," he said smoothly, "we're grateful you're alive, truly. We've had no confirmed survivors from the other lifeboats." Ethan nodded weakly. "Naomi Reyes, she made it too." "Yes," Lowe said. "She's being treated in the next wing. We'll speak with her later. For now, I need your account of what happened on the platform." Ethan hesitated, searching for words. "There was movement under the rig, something massive. It destroyed the supports from below." Lowe's expression didn't change. "A structural collapse, then?" "No," Ethan said, louder this time. "Not a collapse. Something alive was down there. It was circling us for days. It caused the tremors. I saw it myself." One of the aides scribbled notes without looking up. The other adjusted the recorder on the table. Lowe folded his hands. "Mr. Cross, I understand you've been through considerable trauma. Storms at sea can distort perception, light, pressure, fatigue. Our data shows unprecedented weather activity in that region." "It wasn't the storm," Ethan snapped. "We lost people before the worst hit. Robert Kane, Lisa Kwan, Michael Hughes. They didn't drown. They were taken." Lowe's calm never cracked. "Taken by what exactly?" Ethan stared at him, realizing in that moment that the man wasn't asking to understand. He was asking to contain. "You wouldn't believe me," Ethan said finally. "Try me." Ethan leaned forward, lowering his voice. "It was bigger than the rig itself. It moved like it owned the sea. It wasn't an animal, it was intelligent." The aide stopped writing. Lowe studied him for a long moment, then sighed softly. "The human mind often creates patterns under stress. We found evidence of methane destabilization beneath the seabed, a gas eruption. That would explain the tremors, the collapse, and the hallucinations. That's your story, Ethan said bitterly. It's the truth the world will accept, Lowe replied. The company has no interest in fueling myths. You'll receive compensation and long-term medical care. In exchange, you'll sign a confidentiality agreement. We'll handle the rest. Ethan stared at the contract the aide slid onto his bedside table. Lines of legal text blurred in front of his eyes. And if I don't sign? Lowe's smile never wavered. Then your account will be dismissed as post-traumatic delusion, and your employment record will reflect. Negligence. The silence between them stretched until Lowe stood and buttoned his jacket. Rest, Mr. Cross. The sea's already taken enough from you. When he left, Ethan lay back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling. Outside his window, the sound of the surf drifted faintly from the shore. Every crash of water against the rocks felt like a whisper reminding him of what waited below. Later that night, Naomi slipped quietly into his room. She looked as fragile as he felt, eyes sunken, bandages along her wrists where she'd scraped them climbing into the lifeboat. She closed the door softly behind her. They questioned me too, she said. Told me the same thing. Gas pockets, storm surge, hallucinations. They want us to agree to it. Ethan nodded slowly. They won't let the truth out. Naomi sank into the chair beside him, wrapping her blanket tighter. They can bury the story, but they can't bury that. He met her eyes, understanding. Neither of them said the word creature. It hung unspoken between them, too vast to name. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the low hum of the sea through the half-open window. The sound was almost rhythmic, steady, pulsing, familiar. Naomi looked toward it, her voice barely audible. Do you hear that? Ethan did. A faint vibration under the wind, like something enormous breathing beneath the surface. He forced himself to smile. Probably just the tide. But as she left, he sat in the dim light, listening. The rhythm continued, slow, patient, impossibly deep, and far out at sea, beyond the reach of light or radar, the water stirred again. The waves rose and fell in time with the sound. The ocean was calm, the world moved on, and somewhere in the black silence miles below, it remembered his name.